All right, greetings everyone. The purpose of this video is to go over some additional types of statements that we might see in a logic course or a logic unit, as well as to talk about symbolic notation we can use to represent the English versions or the written word versions of particular statements. So we'll start with the information on this slide that tells us, first of all, when we're using symbols to represent statements, that typically the statements will be represented by the letters P, Q, and R. So just like we use um, variables to represent missing numbers in an equation, we can use letters like that to represent statements. And then within our statements, in the word versions of them, there are different connective words that we can use to connect multiple statements. And then that would make what is called a compound statement when you put things together. So the different connective words that we might see are and, or, and then if and then together, and then if and only if. Now I'm going to focus on just the top three, and, or, and if then. So starting with and, when we're using symbols to represent statements, and is represented by this kind of upside down V here. So when we see that, we know that symbolically that is standing for the word and. And a statement that contains the word and in logic has a special name. It's what's known as a conjunction. If a statement contains the word or, symbolically, we can represent that with a V. And that's not exactly the letter V, but it's a symbol that looks similar to V. And we call that type of statement a disjunction. And finally, the if-then, to represent that symbolically, we use an arrow, which sometimes when you read this arrow, another way of saying if-then is the word implies. So we could think of the arrow as meaning implies. And the name for a statement of that type is a conditional statement. And that's because kind of what an if-then statement does is it divides the statement into two parts. One is conditional on the other. So let's look at some examples of how this all relates to statements, these different types of statements, and how we can represent them symbolically. So up in the given instructions, we're told that the letter P is going to represent the statement, it is raining. Q represents the statement, I will go to the park. And R will represent the statement, I will go to the movies. And the first statement we're given here is that I will not go to the park. Well, when I look up above, I see that going to the park is represented by the statement Q, or the variable Q. However, the statement here in part A does not exactly match that, in that we have this word not in it. And so if I want to symbolically say Q, but not Q, the way we do that, there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can do it by using this kind of L on its side, so that means not Q, or we can use a squiggle like this. All right, anytime we see either of those, that means the negation of the original statement. So I will not go to the park is a negation of the statement, I will go to the park. We can represent it as you see there on the slide. The next one, I will go to the movies or the park. Now when I look at this, I see that word or in there, which I know means we're discussing a disjunction. And we know that in disjunction, symbolically, we use that letter V to represent those. So I know that in the middle of my statement, I'm going to have the V to represent the or. And then I'm going to look at the two statements that are given. So the first one is, I will go to the movies. If you look up above, that is represented by the letter R. So I'll put R in the place of that. And then the second part says, I will go to the park. I know it says just the park, but we can connect that to the word I will go. So it's telling us I will go to the park. So when I look up above, that's represented by the statement Q. And so our symbolic representation here would be R, V, Q, or we can read that as R or Q, would be the representation, the symbolic representation of that disjunction. All right, continuing on using the same statements up above. This next one says, it is raining and I will not go to the park. So when I look at this, I see that word and. I know that means we're talking about a conjunction, which means we're going to use that upside down V. So our statement's going to have the upside down V in the middle. The first part of the statement says it is raining. And from up above, I know that that is represented by the symbol P. So I have P on the left. And the second one says, I will not go to the park. If I go back to the previous slide, we had already represented that specific statement symbolically right here with this kind of side LQ. So I know that the second part of our statement should look like that. So it would be P with the upside down V, not Q, or we could read that as P and not Q. Then finally, our last statement here says, if it is raining, then I will go to the movies. And notice here we see the if and then. So we know now that we are talking about a conditional statement, which we know is going to make use of the arrow. And remember the arrow in this case, we can think of it as if then or also representing the phrase implies. And so when I compare to what we've got in our statement here to what's up above, so we're told first of all it is raining. And as we just saw, that's P, represented by P. So the first part of our statement here will be the letter P. The second part, I will go to the movies. Looking up above, I will go to the movies is represented by R. So the second part of our statement here is R. So if we read this, we have P arrow R, or P implies R, or another way to read it would be if P, then R. All right, that's it for now. Thank you for watching.